Welcome to Women's Million Dollar Conversations with Alice Tang, where we share stories from successful businesswomen who have saved, earned, or sold over $1 million and discuss how they built their success and insights to help you achieve your goals. Now, let's join the conversation.
Good morning, Cathy. How are you?
So good, Alice. Good to see you.
Thank you for joining our Women's Million Dollar Conversation today. To be our guest, the woman, the power woman, has already made, accumulated, or earned $1 million. We wanted to make sure that the wisdom we share to have the 90% of the population to cross that threshold. Today, I'm very happy sitting with my wonderful friend, Cathy Kemnitz. And Cathy, tell us a little bit about you and your business.
Perfect. First of all, I want to say thank you, Alice. I'm beyond honored that you asked me to do this. And I'm also honored to be part of your wolf pack because it's very important to me. So I'm super excited. But I will tell you a bit about my business. I started Cathy Kemnitz Consulting in 2019. I just saw there was a portion of businesses, small businesses, that were being a bit underserved. Businesses getting to the point where they know they need to make big decisions. They don't have anyone to sit at the table with them from a financial perspective, especially small businesses. They don't have the money for a full-time CFO. They don't need a full-time CFO. They just need somebody there when they need them there. And I love growth. I love startup companies. So to me, this was that natural fit to step into that role and help my clients. I don't know if I've chosen or they've chosen me. The universe has chosen great clients for me. They're all at some inflection point. So I really help them take their operations, interpret that operations, turn it into data, tell that story back to them with that data, and then we make decisions together based on what the numbers tell us and what the operations tell us. And so I always say I like to swim with them in uncharted waters. So I can be that right-hand person and sit at the table with them. So that was really the reason I started the company. So.
Beautiful. Thank you, Cathy, for sharing. She was humble and said her clients might have chosen her and maybe you have chosen them. But I think because they have the need and you show up with the biggest gift to them is helping to share and know their story. Then they can make decision for future growth. So thank you so much. So it takes 4 years, right, to get to that $1 million of sales. So let's talk a little bit about journey getting there, Cathy.
Absolutely.
What is the biggest bias that you
have
experienced in the last 4 years?
I was thinking about bias the other day, and I'm sure we've all experienced bias to a certain extent. I had really strong parents, and my mom owned her own business, and my dad was a CPA. And I just think I grew up thinking if I felt bias, maybe that was my problem. Maybe I wasn't really feeling it, and maybe I just wasn't showing up appropriately. And so my answer to experiencing bias was to not give it any oxygen and just figure you keep working harder and they're going to notice and that bias will disappear. I think that obviously is not true. As I've gotten older and through my career, I actually did start really recognizing bias and kind of trying to figure out what to do with it. I think outside of just gender bias, I think one of the biggest biases I have felt being an accountant is actually role bias. The accountants aren't like the most loved person in a company, right? I had an old boss tell me the accountants are the ones who take the punch bowl away when the party's getting a little too rowdy. And it's not probably the most revered position because we are kind of gatekeepers. And I think one of the biggest times I felt that role bias was in a company that was really driven, and the people at the top of the company, all of us on leadership team, quite a few of them came from a sales role. So accounting and accountants, that's not necessarily the people that they're not bringing any revenue in. And I was in a meeting with a couple of my leadership team members, and they asked me a direct question. I was asked a direct question by my CEO, and I gave him a very direct answer, speaking to him this is a trusting leadership relationship. And he didn't like the answer, and he blew up. And so I did a little debrief with my CEO after the meeting. I'm like, gosh, how could I have handled that differently? What could I have said differently? And his response was, you just don't have that same familiarity. You don't travel with us. You don't go to customers with us. So maybe next time you approach it by starting the conversation, asking me permission to speak freely. And I sat there. I didn't know what to do with that information. I probably for the first time felt like maybe I'm not thought of as an equal. And that was a tough bias to work through, because working harder doesn't get you through that bias. So that was a tough one, and it's a little bit different than maybe a gender bias, but it was definitely, it hit hard.
Wow, so it's a role bias. I was just flowing listening to your story, Cathy. And have you really resolved to any tentative or permanent solution to that bias? Obviously, asking for permission is not the right thing to do, because if you are having a seat at the table, you have the power and the responsibility and the right to have that candid, honest conversation.
Correct.
And
Correct.
if it seems like an attack, it's not. I'm telling you the truth, because if we all have the same thought, we want the company to be better.
Correct. Exactly. I think my response to that was, you hired me to be in this role to make sure that we're doing the right thing fiscally. And I'm not going to be bullied out of doing the right thing fiscally and saying the thing that I think is the best thing for this company. And so I learned how to deal with that in a very healthy way. It definitely took me some time to get past it, but I feel like I'm better for it. And I feel like it made me more confident, because I think we always question ourselves first. But I think when I really dug into it, it was a learning moment, but I know it made me stronger.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Next question for you. Since we have a lot of audience who might be aspiring to be Cathy, what is the one thing that you want to give to the women who are watching and say, hey, I really want to be Cathy when I grow up? What's the one thing?
I guess if I thought about advice, or just that one piece of just something I can give to other women, is advocate for yourself and don't apologize for it. Maybe that sounds tough and harsh, but I think as women, we tend to not advocate for ourselves and our teams. And we feel bad when we do, because we feel like we're being selfish. But I think if you go out there and ask for what you need, it makes you a better employee. It makes you more confident. And it's still a work in process for me. I'm learning every day how to be better at addressing what my needs are personally and professionally. But I think that's the one piece of advice, if I had 30 years ago, it would have done me a lot of good.
So advocating for me and advocating for my team.
Yeah.
I'd like to add that it's probably easier in general to advocate for others than for
Exactly.
ourselves. I'm not sure if this is a woman thing, but sometimes it's easier to speak for somebody else. And
Yes.
do you see the similar thing in your world?
Yeah, I think so too. I think of like my past position when I'm asking things for my team. I had a team of 13, and we just really needed technology. We really needed help. And again, back to being the accounting group and not being revenue producing, we were always kind of last in line to get the tech work. And so my team was just a bunch of great people they're just willing to pull it together and do whatever they needed to do. So it was really easy for me to go ask for what they needed to make their lives easier, which ultimately made my job a little easier. But really they were working like dogs. And I was like, we need to do something smarter to help the group, because we're growing like crazy. And so we really needed to give them the tools to continue to scale. So it made it a lot easier, because it really was the best thing for the company.
Great, great. In your journey in the last 4 years, looking back, there may be places and points, maybe a short period where you say, you know what, this is difficult. I'm hanging in there. I'm contemplating quitting. If there is a moment like that, what kept you going?
Again, back to the strong parents. I just think I was taught the only way through it is through it. Every time I think about something that's difficult or scary, or again, uncharted waters, you're going to get to the other side. You're going to make it. You just have to buckle down and do the work, get the work done. I think about, there's those things we don't want to do in a day, or not don't want to do, but it's not our favorite thing to do. So I'll get up and that'll be the first thing I do. I want to get that behind me. It's not the work I love to do, but it's work that needs to be done. First thing, get it done. You look behind you, and then the rest of the day is fantastic. So I think just approaching it from that standpoint. The other thing I think of is, hey, we've all lived through our worst day. We've all made it, right? So you can do it again. And then you think about, how difficult is this thing really? And most of the times it's not. It's a matter of being brave and just doing it.
Very good. So I learned just now, the only way to get out is to get through. So either case, you have to get through it. So just do it. And then do the most, maybe it may not be difficult, but difficult in our head task or work first. So eat that frog, just like Brian Tracy has a whole book about eating that frog, so that everything seems so easy.
Exactly.
So it's so hard to swallow a live frog. I've never tried it. Have you?
I am not going to put that on my list of things to do.
It's not in your bucket list. Okay.
It's not on my bucket list. So many things ahead of that.
When you're making a very significant, impactful decision, large, huge decision, what's the process?
I think just because of what I do, there's just tasks that seem so large, right? You have to break those things down into bite-sized pieces. And then you have to know when is enough. I think a lot of us get involved in, I hate the phrase, but analysis paralysis, right? And as an accountant, it's very easy to go down that path. And I need 100% of the data, and then I'm going to make my decision. And that doesn't work, right? There's many times that we can't get all the data, or getting all the data makes the decision way too far past the time that decision needs to be made. So really my process is can I get 60% of the data, maybe 80, but 60 is a lot of times what you end up with. And then can I assess the risk that remains in that 40%? And what bogey could be in that 40% that would derail my decision? And then you make your decision from there. And honestly, sometimes you have to take a leap of faith, because at some point you've got to make the jump. You've got to make the decision. I'm actually going through that right now. And I have to remind myself, I'm never going to have 100% of the data, because this is a personal decision. And it's even harder when it's personal and not business, because now it's going to have a real impact outside for the rest of my life. So it's one of those things you just have to decide at what point you're like, okay, this is as much as I'm going to have. And am I willing to make that decision now? It's kind of my approach.
Great. So 60% come from the data. So the data is important. Yes. But repeating what you said, most of the time, at the time of making decision, we might not get 100% of the data. We just need to somewhat make a leap of faith based on the educated
exactly
of what we know, and then think about what could go wrong in the 40% that might really derail this decision. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Curious question. What is the best advice or the worst advice that made the biggest impact to your life?
I'll go positive. I'll go best advice. I had a CEO. It was my first controller position at a publicly traded company. And it had been massive growth. Again, I love this, right? Massive growth. And he had just been a really good mentor to me my entire time there. There was a little bit of handwriting on the wall, which direction the company was going to go. But I could tell we were starting to go backwards. There was some technology that came into play that was going to make like half of our business disappear. So I took another position, and the CEO took me out to dinner one night. We're at a really nice restaurant here in Portland, El Gacho, and we're having a nice meal. And he said, "Can you do me one favor?" And I'm like, "What's that?" And he's, "Don't leave to just be somebody's accountant. You're more than that. You have more to offer." So that's stuck with me. And I think about that a lot when I have a really great day with my client. I'm like, that's right. That this is really the value I bring to my client. So for example, last week, I did all sorts of things that really weren't typically the work I do with my clients. I helped one of my clients hire a new accountant. I helped another one come up with a bonus plan for her employees. And it was all things that were outside the box, but they weren't necessarily something you come to your accountant for. So to me, it just came full circle what he said to me that day.
What I have heard his advice from my angle was, because everybody can receive that advice differently. If I were sitting at a table next to you, hearing his advice, I'm thinking he is asking to honor your purpose and your value. You only live once. You don't want to change for the sake of change. And perhaps there is more dollars, put it this way. And most of the time, highly skilled professional like yourself, if you jump from one job to another, of course, the compensation is rich. But then what do you need to give up your life for.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so that's a good way to put it.
Awesome. So I have two other curious questions at the end. The first one is we're in Women's $1 Million Conversation. I would like to know your value of money, Cathy.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I think the value of money to me, I've learned is really security. I think security for my family. I don't know how many of you remember 2007 and 2008, and those were some rough years.
Yes,
And,
for many people.
So for a lot of people. And I think it really hit home to me. My husband had his painting business that he had started, I want to say 5 years before that, or 3 years before that. And 1 year prior to 2007, we had gotten ourselves into a pretty expensive shop and showroom. And so we had really just been really reinvesting into his company. And of course, when you reinvest, you're not building a savings account, you're really reinvesting in something that you is a viable growing company. 2007 hits, 2008, and the phone stops ringing for him, just stops ringing. We have a huge now fixed overhead, and 1 week of the phone not ringing turns into 2 weeks, which turns into 2 months. And pretty soon we're putting house payments on a credit card. And I was so afraid that we were going to lose our house. And again, that's that security, right? And we ended up coming out the other side, but it forever changed the way I think about money, I think, especially for the family. So to me, I learned a lesson that it's just that security.
Yeah, a backup plan or plan B, just in case, even all the indicators, the analysis, 90% of it is giving you the goal.
Yes.
But what if it didn't turn out? Do we have a backup plan?
Yes.
Just to survive. You can survive for 100 years, but how about for 6 months or a year, so that you can make some good decision to bounce instead of no.
Yes. Yeah, and I've carried that kind of, not fear is not the right word, but that kind of thought process around money kind of carried over with my clients. And a lot of times now, a lot of my clients, I'll build in a little kind of a cash projection or a cash budget. And we always set a line in there. I won't use the word, but it's the oh no fund, right? And they're like, I want to know anytime the projection shows that my account balance is going to go below this oh no fund. And so it's just something that I get it. I absolutely get it. And we institute it and they all love it. They're all like, oh, yeah, I want to know, because I don't want to wait until it's down to a number that I'm uncomfortable with. I want to know when that's coming up. So
great. In my simple world, for small business owners and a household client, we call it emergency fund from 3 to 6 months of operating expenses. If for businesses, if there is zero business, I mean, it will not be zero business. It will not. But assuming zero business, you still have the money to take care of payroll. Yeah,
exactly.
How about taxes that is due? Assuming last year's same revenue.
Exactly. It's definitely, it's a safety valve, right? So
great. Last question. What are you grateful for?
Oh boy, that list is long. Maybe this is a weird exercise and I don't know really what spurred it on. Maybe it was you, Alice.
Oh, really?
But no, my son and my husband and I, over probably the last 6 months, just randomly, we'll be standing in the kitchen and one of them will throw out, what are you grateful for right now? What are you grateful for today? And so it's random. It's not like we get up every day and do this, but it's been nice because it might just be a moment in time, like something that just happened. But I think for me, I've got to say, I'm just grateful for our health. I'm grateful for the fact that we have a home, we have a warm meal, we have warm food. At any point in time, at any point in our lives, we could have taken a different turn and been in a different situation. And I think everything you do leads to this moment, and what could have happened in the past that would have changed where we are today. So I think we're just really fortunate that we are where we are. I have a career that fills my cup. I love coming home and being home with my family. This is my oasis. I don't need to escape from this. And I don't know, I could not be more fulfilled, I think, at this point in my life.
Thank you. Very well said. I'm grateful for Cathy willing to be our guest this morning in her very packed, busy schedule. Thank you for the friendship. And more importantly, thank you for choosing to be a role model for the women who's watching Women's $1 Million Conversation. How do people find you? Last question.
Email. You can email me. It's Cathy at Kemnitz Consulting.com. Or you can reach me by cell phone. And that is all on my website, which is www.ckemnitzconsulting.com. So that's a mouthful, but you can find me.
Great. Thank you so much for taking time once again. I'm grateful for you.
Thank you, Alice. I'm so grateful for you.